The Marinade.
There's no O in Marinade. Let's try it one more time. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
The Marinade.
Marinade.
Bone marinade. The
That's
Marinade.
The Marinade. With Jason Earle. We were never fans of stock car races. Though mesmerized by the roaring of those cars.
Welcome to the Marinade with Jason
Out
Earle,
in the
episode
dark
21, and a
beside
highly anticipated episode it is, with the great Austin Lucas, who has made one of our favorite records of the year, quite possibly our favorite record of 2018. I'm so grateful for Austin's time. We only had about 20 minutes to talk, and so we fit it in as tightly as possible. We caught up at the Sing Out Loud Festival in St. Augustine. If you haven't already, after you finish this, go back and listen to our episode with Sadler Vaden. And then we also have one with Chuck Reagan coming up that was recorded at the same time in an epic festival, a beautiful experience. And, you know, sometimes musicians are in and out. They're busy. I mean, Austin had a sound check to do, and Tim Barry was playing at the time, and then he and Chuck were going to get up together. So he only had, like I said, about 20 minutes to talk, and we had no time to mess around. We got right down to business. No pleasantries, no bullshit, just deep, heavy conversation about process and everything that goes along with it. I'm so thankful for this opportunity. A couple of songs that are playing, one playing now and one that's going to be playing at the end that I want to make you aware of. That's Immortal Americans off of Austin's excellent record by the same name. And then My Mother and the Devil, which is another incredible tune. And we talk about that record, Immortal Americans, throughout this conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm so thankful for this opportunity. Please enjoy Austin Lucas.
But they sang the songs of their fathers. Sha-la-la, ooh-la-la-la, and all the prayers of their mothers. Dutiful daughters, dutiful sons. Sha-la-la goes the rattle and hum from the hearth of a Midwestern home. Sha-la-la, that's the sound of Immortal Americans. My friends turned the radio off. Those holy hymns were no longer ours. Though we sang the songs of our fathers, sha-la-la, ooh-la-la-la, and all the prayers of our mothers, dutiful daughters, dutiful sons. Hey, check. Awesome. Man, Austin, I really appreciate this. I'm going to start, since we have a limited time. We have this wonderful little community with my podcast, and I'm really fortunate. And we have some amazing Patreon patrons.
Cool.
And our Patreon patron, Zach, had a question.
Okay, cool.
So, first of all, Immortal Americans is, if not my favorite, it's one of my 2 or 3 favorite records of the year.
Wow,
And
awesome.
It may be my favorite record of the year. And it's like every time I, go to listen to something, it's like I just gravitate back to it and gravitate back to it and gravitate back
Wow,
to
that's
it.
great. That's awesome.
It's so wonderful. And so I've mentioned it on the show, and then fans of the show started to listen to it, and now everybody's singing your praises in our little
That's cool.
community.
That's really, really cool. Awesome.
And it's been fun.
Yeah.
So he was asking about the song Happy, and he loves the line, "You were born a little sparrow with an arrow in your throat."
Mhm.
And he was asking where that line came from.
I mean, I wrote that. That's autobiographical,
Mm.
you know.
It's I've sort of my entire life I've had suffered from virtually crippling social anxiety, and anxiety, generalized anxiety, and overall, but the largest portion of my anxiety disorder stems from social interactions, and I'm in the wrong line of work.
Yeah, right.
But it's always been like this for my entire life, and since I was little, I've always suffered from a complex of feeling like I was misunderstood, and feeling like people didn't get me, didn't get my sense of humor, didn't get like my viewpoints or whatever. And at one point, I got really loud. Like it kind of made me angry and maybe just like kind of bang my own drum about like what I believed in, really loudly.
Yeah.
And at one point I realized that I was pushing people away even further, which wasn't the thing that I really wanted to do, so when I say that line, the lead up, you want to get high because living low is all you've known, and you were born a little sparrow with an arrow in your throat.
Yeah.
It's like the only way that I could ever really cope with like my anxiety was by getting drunk and getting high, and and then once that was taken away from me, then I was sort of really naked, and then I was left with just that feeling of not being good enough and not being like, intelligent enough and not being attractive enough and not being all of these things that, this is the same kind of stuff that almost everybody feels, I think,
Sure.
And to different varying degrees, but like, I'm an unfortunate soul in that like I let it sort of cripple me a lot. So, that's what that's about.
Wow.
Yeah.
What do you do for your anxiety then?
Well, a lot of things. I mean, I do martial arts. I'm a kickboxer. I do Muay Thai.
Oh, cool.
I've traveled to Thailand to study. I haven't had any fights in a ring yet, but I'm sort of a fighter. I had a fight scheduled actually this last March, but I had to cancel it for various reasons.
Yeah.
And I hope to eventually get in the ring with somebody someday.
Wow.
Just because I want to prove to myself I can do it. Like I'm 40 almost. Like I'll be 40 this coming March, and so I'm not planning on having any kind of a career as a boxer.
Yeah.
But I would like to take an amateur fight for fun. And one of the main reasons I want to do it is because, at my gym, I've sort of made a habit of like taking kind of the younger people that come in there under my wing and like working with them. And as time has gone on, I've realized that I really like teaching. And I know that if I want to teach other people how to box, it's possible that one day I might have to corner somebody. And I know that the only way I'll really be able to ever do that is to get experience myself doing it.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why I want to do it is because one of the largest changes that I made in my life, and in battling my anxiety, was boxing. Because, my whole life I've mostly had like more women friends than men friends. Not that doesn't mean that I don't have guy friends or whatever, but
Sure.
I've always been closer with women. Maybe because my mom raised me predominantly. She was a single mother. My parents split up, and my dad was in my life, but my mom was my primary parental figure.
Sure.
I've always just felt closer to women than I have to men, and a lot of the time I've always sort of kind of felt intimidated by other men, and like afraid of them, and I've always sort of like puffed out my chest because I wanted to like kind of have a tough exterior, and I've acted aloof around other men because they frighten me.
Yeah.
And so part of my like healing process and becoming, dealing with my anxiety it's been really helpful to do this because I'm forced to like interact with other men at my gym, and like men that I would never have anything in common with. Like it used to be okay mostly if like we had punk in common or we had metal in common, or you know what I mean, like something like that. We had like some sort of musical bonding thing, because that was the only thing I ever had was music my whole life.
Right.
You know, like that I was interested, other than like Star Wars.
Yeah.
You know, like, or whatever,
Yeah,
like, and Star Trek. I mean, you know, just movies, I should say,
Sure.
really, but science fiction and fantasy.
Yeah.
You know, like, so this is like the first thing I've ever had where I could like bond with other people, you know what I mean, like about something other than these like kind of very specific nerd things. And of
Yeah.
course, this is a specific nerd thing too in its own way, because it's like a martial art or whatever. But it's like really helped me become more gregarious and like able to just like interact with whoever, you know, like, because now I'm like the first person in the gym when someone new comes in, I'm like, hey, how's it going? I'm Austin. It's really nice to meet you, you know, like, and I never used to be able to be like that. I mean, you know, I just couldn't, you know, and I, you know, I still have a lot of social anxiety, and I have a lot of anxiety about my career, you know, like that specifically, that's really difficult to deal with. And, you know, and depression, you know, as a result of anxiety, and vice versa.
Yeah.
But, you know, and I take Lexapro.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
You know, it's, I just started it like a few weeks ago. So I'm just starting to really see the positive effects from it.
Good.
Yeah. But it took me a long time to even like admit that I could do that without like feeling like it was some sort of failure. Like I couldn't do it myself. I mean, I'm on this like long mental health journey of like 5 years where I like started losing weight, and then I quit smoking, and I quit drinking, and I quit doing drugs, and I quit, I started eating healthy, and then I started really exercising, and then I started really exercising, and like, I was just doing all this stuff to feel better about myself, and it just, it's not enough. And at some point, like, a couple months ago, I was just like, I have to do something. I have to, take something.
Yeah.
Like I need to follow this path, because like I'm not 100%.
Yeah.
And who's 100%?
No.
Nobody. But
nothing.
I know that my depression and anxiety is enough that it's like making my quality of life lower.
Right.
And
that's it. Like when it gets in the way. So I too suffer from generalized anxiety.
Yeah.
And I'm in therapy, and it's been so good for me.
Uh-huh.
It is working. But it's interesting how I shifted the standard, because before I was just living with it, and I was like, it just is what it is. And I'd have my panic attack, and I'd feel flu-like symptoms is how it would manifest for me sometimes, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. It gets really intense. And I just was like, this is how it is. And then I started going to therapy, and it started getting better. Mm-hmm. But now it's like I've moved the bar. Now I'm like expecting more, to get better and better. And so like I may not have a panic attack for 6 months, and now, but still I'm terrified of death, like, so like I'm just worried. You never get to that 100%.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't. But, I'm just choosing to utilize one more tool.
Right.
And so,
that's great for you, man.
Yeah. And I'm also, I'm intermittently in therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like right now I'm in between therapists.
Okay.
Yeah. I need to get another one. But that's a whole complicated insurance issue that I don't want to, like who's in my network.
Sure.
And who's worth a fuck.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
it's a.
Yeah, I got lucky, man. I got somebody in network that's amazing.
Good for you.
Yeah, I'm really fortunate. You mentioned anxiety about your career, but you've just put out a masterpiece. So can you speak to that?
Yeah. I mean,
I mean, I feel like I'm sorry that I'm speaking in hyperbole about it, and I hope it doesn't make you uncomfortable. It's just that I fucking love that record.
I'm glad that you love it, and please keep telling people about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not gonna go into it, but the truth is that a lot of balls have been dropped in the rollout and the various aspects of this album.
Oh, that sucks, man.
And it's sold out right now, which is great.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't be sold out.
Right.
They should have printed more.
Yeah.
There's all these, things, and
it's not just the record label, it's all sorts of other things.
Yeah.
And, and there, I'm not complaining about my record label. I'm not complaining about anybody else, but it's been a very big uphill slog,
Okay.
and it's not as if it's,
Well, all right, so let's focus on the happier stuff then. And that it seems to be a record about place quite a bit. It seems to be about the Midwest specifically. And I just was wondering about your headspace as those songs were coming together. Did you have an idea of exactly what you wanted from the record? Are they pieces of a record that came together? Like, what was that whole process like?
Yeah, I mean, they definitely, it fit together exactly, how I wanted it to.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing's ever perfect, right?
Sure.
At least in the eye of the creator, But yeah, I mean, I moved back to Bloomington and the songs just sort of came. I wrote maybe one or two before I moved back to Bloomington, but I was really already in the transition, to moving back there.
Yeah.
So in a way, those are kind of, you know what I mean? These moving pieces, because how do you get someplace? You need a road.
Right.
You know what I mean? And in a lot of
Yeah.
ways, those songs are the asphalt that paved that road to me getting back to where I needed to be
Oh, great.
in my life and in, the world.
So its own form of therapy, really.
I mean, of course, yeah.
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 Wait, moving back from Prague?
Well,
was that-
I've been in Prague. I moved back in 2008 from Prague.
Oh, you've been back a while.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. I was in Nashville for a few years. That's
Okay.
that's the last place that I was, and that's where I had to I dug myself into a very deep, dark depression, and then I had to dig myself out of it. Yeah.
What was not necessarily what was the bottom, but what got you out of the bottom? What was the moment, or was there one?
I don't know. That's a hard one to say.
Yeah.
It was just a series of events. I mean, I was at the bottom and I didn't realize it, and then I, quit smoking, and then I really fell off because that had been sort of my antidepressant for a long time,
Oh, wow.
and I didn't realize it.
Yeah.
And then once that was gone, and I was just naked to the world with no cigarettes, then my anxiety came flooding back, and I had all those, receptors in my brain that were used to, sucking up that nicotine. They didn't know what to do. And so then I was just my brain chemistry took a long time to, work itself out and return back to normal. And then even when it turned back to normal, I still had the anxiety that I was self-medicating for with cigarettes and, alcohol and whatever. But then the alcohol turned on me and I couldn't drink anymore, because I was too full of anxiety that I just started having episodes. I ended up crying in the back of taxis, and I ended up having bad moments,
Right.
where I ended up driving. I never drive drunk, or I don't even, I would have maybe one beer maximum and drive for almost all of my life. And then, I would get wasted and have something happen and jump in my van and cross state lines,
Wow.
wake up on the side of the road,
Yeah.
because I was having these episodes, and that was when I was okay, well, I've got to stop drinking too.
Right.
So, it's these incremental steps. So there wasn't really a moment, so much as there was a series of moments that just made me make a new realization that something else was needing to get culled,
Yeah.
and I just slowly but surely culled all of my vices, and that and I didn't get rid of all of them until a couple years ago, really.
Wow.
Till I finally was okay, I don't do any of this stuff anymore.
Yeah.
I'm just a human trying to be a better human.
Right.
And none of this shit that's holding me down is going to hold me down. And my last thing that's holding me down is just my anxiety and my victim complex, and what I mean, and my depression. And I know it's never going to go away fully, but I'm going to keep working on it.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
That's all you can do, right?
Yeah, I know.
You just got to keep working on it and keep creating your art. Keep
Yep.
making your records and keep doing what you're doing. I mean, there's nothing else you can do. Just
Yeah, I know,
one
that's
foot in
right.
front of the other. And
Yeah.
man, I know you got to go soon, but what is your process like? If you sit down to write, are you writing every day? are you writing when the muse strikes?
Oh, it depends. I don't write every day. I write when the muse strikes, and then I write when I have to. So if I know that I've got, if I'm working on something, like I wrote the last few songs for Immortal Americans, like in the last, couple of months before the record came out.
Wow.
Like I was just still working.
Yeah.
And it just kept, coming out, but I didn't write, I think Shadow and Marie, I didn't put the finishing touches on that till the very,
That song's incredible.
like the
man.
end, like that was, I think, the last song that I, finally finished up.
Wow.
But I had that one in my mind and wanted it, like to be a thing. And once I really set my mind to it, it came out. But then I was still playing with some of the chords and, playing with, some of the harmonies and stuff like that, some of the melody lines, and then, Happy came towards the very end as well. You know, like it came like in the last month before.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was the impetus for Shadow and Marie?
Well, like my partner had cancer, and I actually discovered the lump in her breast very early on in our relationship, and so I was on the road and we, weren't serious at all, and she found out that she did in fact have cancer after I found the tumor, and that it was in fact, malignant. And so the first year of our relationship was basically her cancer. And she was very ill. And, even past, like after it was over, after her, bilateral mastectomy and after chemo was over, like her body's changed. And she's just like constantly asking me, like, am I still beautiful to you? And I just like, I knew that words weren't enough. I could tell her over and over again, but like they just weren't enough. And so I needed to write. I needed to tell her in song because that's really like the only way that I can convey those emotions. Like it's not that I'm a terrible speaker, and it's not that I'm, unable to express myself to my friends and my loved ones and stuff. But like really when I have time to sit down and write a song is when I can really, convey that. And I knew that like the only way I was going to be able to prove to her, like once and for all how beautiful she was to me still, like was to write that song. God. So yeah.
I don't know how you follow that with a question.
Well, I think we actually might be out of time.
I think we're out of time, so it's the perfect one to end it on.
Yeah.
Austin, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for that record.
Yeah,
thank you for sharing it with us.
No problem.
It's so beautiful, and I love it, and I will keep spreading the word for sure.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, man. I'm looking forward to your set.
Thanks, man.
Baby, I have never been so low, never been so far away from home. I hear the blues, don't see not the way that we might see the light of day.
Austin Lucas, y'all, what a thrill. Oh my goodness, so cool. He went on to play this incredible burner of a set, and then Chuck Reagan got up on stage with him at Sing Out Loud Festival, and they together have this incredible synergy. Christina Wagner got up on stage, our friend from Jacksonville, who's also an incredible songwriter and a beautiful singer, who you've heard me mention on the show before. It was a magical day, and I'm so thankful for Austin's time, and I'm so thankful for the record that he put out this year. I've said it before, but seriously, but between that and Hawks and Doves from a White Hotel, those to me are the two best records of the year thus far. And it's been a special year. I mean, it's been a great year for music, and still, I think those two records stand out. So if you haven't already, go check out Immortal Americans by Austin Lucas. You can find it anywhere you buy music. And I also recommend, and I don't know the situation that he mentioned during the show about the physical copies, but if you can find a copy of the vinyl, if those are still available, I highly recommend that if you're a vinyl collector, you get that. It's physically a beautiful copy of the album as well. So Austin Lucas, Immortal Americans, get it wherever you can get music. Such a good record, and I'm so grateful for Austin's time and candor. I mean, to open up that much in 20 minutes, just amazing. And I'm so thankful that he spent some time with us, and I'm so thankful to all of you for listening. What I'm getting down on, y'all, just a really focused kind of time in my life where I've been reading Bruce Springsteen's autobiography since I talked to Sadler Vaden, so around a month now. And it's a pretty big book, but I'm spending my time on it because of the way that he tells a story. I'm really trying to kind of dissect the way that he goes about storytelling. And the cool thing about this experience for a fan of his music is that the book is organized chronologically by album. And so I'll read a chapter, and that chapter takes me a day and a half, and he's talking about one of his albums. Well, during that day and a half, that's what I've been consuming. And it is so cool to dive back into the boss's catalog, especially because I don't think I'd fully processed how many songs of his have been covered by other people, especially country artists. So, for example, there's a song on Tunnel of Love, which is an excellent Bruce Springsteen record, and it's called Tougher Than the Rest. I got to know that song in the 90s because of Chris Ledoux. So Chris Ledoux covered that song, and that's kind of how I got into that particular song. And I don't know that I processed that connection. I'd heard his version, Springsteen's Tunnel of Love version, and then I'd heard the Chris Ledoux version, and I was crazy about that Chris Ledoux version too. But I don't think I really made the connection until the other day when I was reading that chapter. So it's a really fun experience for me musically to just get totally lost in one artist in the way that I have in the past with someone like Jason Isbell or Austin Lucas or Casey Anderson, for example, where I just can't stop listening to that record. This is the man's whole discography, which is really, really fun. And also, the book is worth your time. It's a really good story, and he's an excellent writer, as you might expect from somebody who wrote so many great songs. Also finally saw Darren Aronofsky's film Mother, which came out, I think, in 2017. Really divisive kind of film. A lot of people loved it. A lot of people hated it. Not very many people in the middle. I am one who loved it. We watched it, Chris and I did, a couple days before Halloween, looking for something spooky. All of my anxieties just came to light in this film. So make sure you're in a good place if you're going to watch it, but I highly recommend it. I love Darren Aronofsky. Aronofsky is kind of, he probably is my favorite filmmaker. He's certainly up there, starting with Pi, and then Requiem for a Dream, and on and on and on with all the great films that he's made. So I highly recommend Mother to check that out. And then the podcast I'm getting down on right now is Caruth. It's the story of Ray Caruth, the former Carolina Panthers wide receiver who was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder, the murder of his girlfriend who was pregnant with their child at the time. It's a fascinating story. It casts a little bit of doubt on his role in the whole experience. It's made by a reporter who's followed this story for the Charlotte Observer since it happened in the late 90s. So he's got a wealth of knowledge and experience, and he tells a really compelling tale. So that's the podcast that I've kind of really been deep into right now. Like I said, really focused. I mean, I haven't had my hand in a lot of things. I've just been really diving deep on on certain things that I'm passionate about, which has been a good feeling. Y'all, thank you so much for your support. Our Patreon is really ramping up. Huge shout out to Jen Ross, my great friend who I love so dearly, who is now a Patreon patron. And I'm going to hold you to that, Jen. You said more collabs to come. She is my favorite photographer in the world, and I am so fortunate to have gotten to work with her many times. If you are a Patreon patron, then you've heard that story. If you aren't, please go on over to Patreon and check it out. I'm going to release a Patreon only, for now at least. I'm going to get some feedback from our Patreon patrons on what they think about it and what I should do with it. Conversation with Greg Hughes, who records under the name Bobby's Oar. I also have been listening to him, so I've been getting down on Bobby's Oar, and I recommend that you check him out too. Dear sweet guy, just a sweetheart. And I got to catch up with him at Little Indies and watch him play with Chris's art on the walls. It was such a cool experience. My partner in life, Chris, has an art show that's running for a few more days now at Little Indies, and I got to see this musician who is fantastic, who is also a fan of the show, which I'm so grateful for, playing music while my best friend in the world's art is up on the walls. It was a special experience for me, and I'm really grateful to Chris and to Greg. Check him out. I'm going to release that episode to our Patreon patrons and then see where it goes. You know, maybe it'll be a website release, maybe it'll be a feature episode. Just going to kind of make sure that I'm taking care of my people who are so supportive, and I'm so grateful for everything that they do. Also got an episode of Jason's Journey that was just released recently, and another one coming out pretty soon for our Patreon patrons. Follow us on Twitter at Marinade Podcast, Marinade_podcast on Instagram, where you can also see some of our short stories. Check us out on Facebook, facebook.com/Marinade Podcast, marinadepodcast.com. Send me an email, marinadepodcast@gmail.com. I mean, however you can access it. And the biggest thing, y'all, if you can just give us a rating wherever you consume podcasts. We're on every major podcast outlet, and if we're not on the one that you want, let me know and I'll make it happen as soon as possible. But if you give us a rating, it makes a big difference. It's free for you, and it's a huge thing for us. So give us that 5-star rating if you feel that strongly about us. If you don't feel that strongly about us, I still appreciate you listening. Don't worry about rating us. I love y'all. I'm so grateful for you. Look out for episode 22 coming up pretty soon with Chuck Reagan. What an amazing conversation that was. What an amazing conversation this one with Austin Lucas was. Thank you. Cheers, y'all.
My mother says the devil is the only one who ever gained a thing by telling folks the truth. And my father says the devil and my mother are the only ones who'll be there always and forever, no matter what I do. Sea of wheat, taller than a man. I brush the grain with my left hand, smell wet earth on the wind, and shiver where I stand. I hear the blues from somewhere up ahead, the voice of a man, he sounds scared. My